Hi everyone, I'm David Hamilton. I'm the kindness czar for Psychologies magazine, live from my kitchen today. I thought I'd move to the kitchen rather than the living room because there's workers through the back of the other wall and there's lots of hammering going on. Just before I started, I remembered at the last minute to flick my settings onto, you know that thing, do not disturb. You ever tried it actually? It's like airplane mode on when you're on the plane, I suppose, and it means that people can't phone you. Because I was leading a meditation once, a big hotel in London, with a ton of people, and I was in the middle of doing the meditation. I'd forgotten to switch the do not disturb thing on, and I had the goal group. I was saying, you're now at this point in space and time, with only an awareness of your own consciousness. And then my phone rang, and I panicked. You know, you're leading a live meditation, and your phone rings, and you get that total mind blank, and you just can't think clearly. Well, in that state of mind blank, not being able to think clearly because I'm leading a meditation and my phone's ringing, and I was using the Bluetooth, and so the sound, your musical track from the phone comes through the speakers, and so what happened is the music cuts out as the phone rings, and I'm like, oh, and I'm absolutely mortified, and so I got this kind of mind blank, and in the state of mind blank, instead of ending call, I swiped it to answer it. Totally. But the thing is, I hadn't realised what I'd done, and so I took a big deep breath and tried to compose myself, and for the second time I went, you're at this point in space and time with only an awareness of your own consciousness. And my mum's voice piped through, hello! I could see people in the room going like that, in the state of meditation, wondering what on earth was happening. My mum's voice coming through, and I was absolutely mortified. And in that state of total mortification, people talk about fight or flight, the stress response. It's not just fight or flight, it's fight, flight or freeze. And so what happens is you get an absolute, total mind blank. And in that state, instead of doing anything, I did absolutely nothing at all. I just kind of hoped that it would stop. So for the third time, I said, you're at this point in space and time with only an awareness of your own consciousness. And the next line just done it. It was, is there anybody there? And suddenly, it was like, the mediumship, hello friend, kind of thing. And in that, I just got sudden lucidity, end call, and all of a sudden the music came back on. And at the end, I apologised to the group, because what happened is it was Mother's Day, you see, and I live in Scotland. I was in England in this hotel, and it was my mum phoning to say, well, thanks for the flowers. So anyway, I just thought I'd tell you that wee story, because just before I pressed the go live button, a text had come in, and I suddenly remembered that I hadn't put my phone on to do not disturb, which means someone technically could actually phone me in the middle of this Facebook Live. So anyway, I'm going to talk all things kindness. As you know, this might be your first time tuning into one of my Facebook Lives on the Psychologies page, but basically once a month I come on and I talk about lots of things kindness related, usually with a little spin of science, and that's because I'm the author of the book, The 5 Side Effects of Kindness, which is all the different physical effects, psychological and physical effects that inside the body of being kind, kind of thing. So I usually put a wee bit of a science onto it. But I want to start with a story today, because I've got a particular theme to talk to you about. So years ago, back in 2001, I was working as a barman. So I'd resigned from my job. I was formerly a scientist within the pharmaceutical industry, working on building cardiovascular and cancer drugs. And friends and I had set up a charity, Spirit Aid Foundation, for children whose lives had been affected by war and poverty. That was our mission statement. Now, being a director of a charity and earning, so I took a job in a bar, and there was an elderly gentleman called Jack who used to come in every day, certainly every day that I was working, and he'd come to the bar at lunchtime at 12 o'clock, and he'd always order a Bell's whiskey. Now, I'd never really spoken to Jack, and then one day, I don't know how long I'd been working there, maybe 2-3 weeks, And I just got chatting, and he told me a bit about his life. And he said, when I was a young man, well, he said, a boy really, he'd only really just left school, like months earlier, and he found himself on the front line in the war, in the Second World War. And he told me this extraordinary story. And he said there was one time that I got separated from my company, my group. He didn't tell me why that happened, he just said I got separated from my company. And I was hiding out in a town, a bombed out town full of bombed out buildings, and I was terrified because I was just a kid, just literally. I'm out of school a few months ago, and here I am in the war in a country that I've never been in before. I think it was France he said he was in. And he said I was hiding there hoping that some people from my company or from another section of the army would come and rescue me or find me. He said, I'm standing there, I'm terrified. And he said then his worst fears were realised as a troop of German soldiers started coming through the town, and they were checking the buildings, presumably looking for people like Jack. And he said, I was absolutely terrified. Here I am, just a kid, I'm standing, I'm holding my gun, and I'm literally physically shaking with fear. And he said, all these thoughts are going through my mind. Should I, if someone comes into the building, do I shoot them? But I can't shoot them because then they'll hear me, and I might kill him. But then the rest of the group are going to come and get me. I'm dead. And he was terrified, and he thought maybe I could hide, but there's nowhere to hide. Everything's bombed out in rubble. And he said he's standing there, just almost paralysed, unable to think clearly, to make a decision. And then he heard one of the German soldiers coming into the building. He could hear his footsteps on the broken stones and glass. And he was standing there. Jack said the only thing he could think of doing was stand behind the doorway in this room. And he was standing there, physically shaking with fear. And he said the German soldier came round, and Jack was just holding his gun. He wasn't even pointing it. He was just so terrified, couldn't move. And the German soldier came round, and he looked at Jack immediately with his gun up. And Jack said, you know what happened? I wet myself. He said, I wet myself. I was so terrified. And then the most extraordinary thing happened. So the German soldier holding his gun at him, pointing at Jack, and then he sees Jack shaking with fear, and he sees the puddle of urine, his leg and puddle of urine. And the German soldier, Jack told me, he just looked at me and he smiled, he went, and he put his hand up, and he backed away, and he put his gun down, and he turned his back on Jack, and he walked out of the building, and he signalled to the rest of the soldiers of his group that the building was clear. And Jack told me this story, and he said, despite all that I witnessed in the war, he said, that is the thing I most remember about the Second World War. And isn't that absolutely extraordinary? That act of compassion, act of empathy, compassion, kindness, call it what you will, really. And Jack said that moulded the kind of person he became in his life. And he became a kind person. He said it changed me as an individual. I literally became a good person as a consequence of that German soldier's compassion towards me that he shared, that he saved my life. And I want to share that story with you because I want to draw your attention to the fact that Jack, as he went through his life, that he may well still be alive. I mean, I worked in that bar 17 years ago, and I think he was 73 something. He was around about 70-ish. I didn't really ask him. I figured out how old he must have been because he told me he was 16 or something like that at the time. So I figured out it must have been about 70. So he probably may well be still alive. But he himself, through his own kindness, as a consequence of that, had been kind to many, many thousands of people, presumably, through his life. And I wanted to draw your attention to the ripple effect of kindness. When you do something kind, my phone looked like it's losing battery. Now this is interesting, my phone's out to 20% battery. So I'm going to make this shorter than usual. A little icon came up, low power mode. So we're on low power mode, so hopefully we've got enough battery. But anyway, so there's a ripple effect of kindness. When you do something kind, what you don't see is what happens next. You know, it ripples on and affects people as a consequence. And what causes that ripple is something called elevation. There's a professor called Jonathan Haidt. He's a professor of ethical leadership at New York University. He coined the term elevation, and he basically said that described elevation as that sense of warmth or connection that might be gratitude or joy or relief even, that is associated with receiving or witnessing an act of kindness. It's called elevation, and research on elevation has shown that elevation is actually what powers the wave. So if you think of the ripple effect of kindness as a wave, you drop a stone in a pond and it creates this little wave. So what pushes the wave is elevation. It's each person in turn feels uplifted, elevated or warm or connected as a consequence of having received or witnessed kindness, and they pay it forward. They do something else for someone else. So that's what elevation is. I would encourage you to watch things that inspire you. One of my favourite YouTube videos, I posted it on my page. If you go on my own Facebook page, David R. Hamilton PhD, you'll see it there from a couple of days ago. Kindness Boomerang, a charity called Life Vest Inside. The founder of the charity, a girl called Orly Waba, does amazing work on kindness. I think it's at 28 million views. I think I've watched it 1 million of those. So, but amazing video about the ripple effect of kindness. But you can search for it anyway. If you don't go on my page, it's called Kindness Boomerang by Life Vest Inside, because kindness keeps the world afloat. That's the motto. Life Vest inside of us, because kindness keeps the world afloat. Love it. So anyway, I often watch animal rescue videos. I'm kind of a dilemma here with them, because those of you who followed my own story, I lost my dog Oscar a couple of years ago, 3 or so years ago. Oscar was my best friend. I called him my boy, actually. We don't have any human babies yet, so Oscar was kind of my boy, and he really was a member of the family as far as I was concerned. He was the king of the house, really. I was third in the pecking order in our house. I kind of wanted to be the alpha male, but that didn't really work out. Oscar very quickly realised that I was actually the playmate, the goofball, if you like. So we just played all the time, but it was great. Anyway, but I often watch animal rescue videos. I struggle emotionally at the beginning, because I really find it hard to deal with seeing the animal in such a state in the first place, that people could have neglected or harmed them in the first place, or that they could be suffering from some way. I've really struggled with seeing them being in that state, but I feel exhilarated and so grateful and joyous when I see them smiling and their tails wagging and they're happy at the end. And of course the same will apply to other animals, not just dogs. I'm relating it to dogs from my own experience, but of course the same is true for all animals that we have a connection with. And I often watch, dog rescue videos, and I find that seeing the kindnesses of the people who are helping them, it makes me want to be a better person. And I think that's what the ripple effect, that's what elevation is. It makes you want to be a better person. You see something good in the world, someone doing something good in the world, and it makes you a better person as a consequence. And that's part of what elevation is. It's that motivation as a consequence of what you've witnessed or received, that motivation to do something wholehearted for someone else. On that kind of note, something I call nature's catch-22. People have asked me the question, if there's all these benefits, because there is a real physical benefit. In fact, I read a scientific paper recently. It's called a review paper, where they take hundreds of different, or all the publications, and they review it all together. And I think it was called a Pet Ownership and Cardiovascular Risk, a scientific statement from the American Heart Association. Yeah, that's what it was called. And they basically took all the scientific studies looking at the research that shows that having animals in your life is protective towards your heart. And they actually concluded, see if I can remember the exact sentence, they concluded that pet ownership is probably associated with a decreased risk of cardiovascular disease. I say probably. Scientists really are non-committal people by nature. They really don't want to absolutely commit until it's absolutely certain. They did say that pet ownership is almost certainly likely to be the cause of that reduced risk of cardiovascular disease. And yeah, I don't even like the word pet. I never considered Oscar as a pet. He was a family member. In fact, I wrote a blog when Oscar was in my life, in our lives, and I wrote the blog because so many people refer to dogs as the dog, and I said he's not the dog. He's my family. So pet ownership, but it was talking about, generally speaking, the connection that we have with animals. And it's not about just having a dog in your house, just lying about doing nothing. That has no benefits to your cardiovascular health at all. It's the quality of relationship that you have with the dog, or the cat, or the horse, or the rabbit, whatever animal in your life. It's the quality of relationship that you have, not having the dog or a dog in your house, or a cat. It's the quality of connection that matters. Scientists did a study actually where they found that people who have a good relationship with a dog, when they looked at the levels of a hormone called oxytocin, which I've talked about a lot in other Facebook lives. If you look back on the other ones that I've done, I've talked a lot about, I call it the kindness hormone, because oxytocin is produced as a consequence of how we feel, those feelings of warmth and connection that accompany being kind. And they found that during 13 minutes of playful or warm interaction with the dog, oxytocin levels rose at a rate of about 10% per minute. Isn't that extraordinary? But only in the people who had good relationships with the dogs. That was not the case in people who didn't have good relationships with the dogs. And again, the same would occur for cats, horses, rabbits, any animal that we tend to bond with. So it's not about having a dog in your house, it's about the quality of affection and warmth and playfulness that you have that is cardio protective. And that's something else I wanted to talk about, not cardio protective, but the motivations behind things. I call this nature's catch-22. Someone once said to me, so I could just go out and get a dog then and that's good for my heart, or I could just be kind to people and it's good for my heart. And the answer to that is no. Not unless you really mean it. Because the cardiovascular benefits and even emotional benefits of having an animal in your life or being kind to people are dependent upon the fact that you mean it. They're dependent upon the feelings of warmth. Remember elevation. They're dependent upon the feelings of warmth and connection that you get through interacting with the animal or being kind to a person. It's through the connection that you get. Now, you cannot get that connection unless you mean what you're doing, unless you're genuinely coming from the heart. So if you want to benefit your heart, you've got to lead from your heart. So I call this nature's catch-22. You cannot gain from an act of kindness unless you mean it, because you have to mean it to feel it. And it's how it feels that that causes the physiological benefits and the emotional benefits of kindness or warmth and affection with animals. So anyway, I wanted to just check the time here. I wanted to leave you with just a little exercise to do for the next month. I call this counting kindnesses, based on some research that found that keeping a note of all the nice things that you do is actually really, really beneficial, and it causes you also to focus on doing it and being kind because it's the right thing to do. So just for the next month, just take a little diary and keep a note of all the nice things that you say and the nice things that you do. And what it'll do, it will cause you to notice that you're a much nicer person than you thought you were, if you ever doubted. And secondly, it will cause you to start focusing more or noticing that when you are kind, you're doing it because it's the right thing to do, not because you're trying to gain something from it. So anyway, that's the end of today's broadcast, only because I probably only have about 1 or 2% battery life left on my phone. So lucky we made it just in time. It's been good, as usual, chatting with you, live from my kitchen here in the town of Dunblane in central Scotland. So signing off for today, be kind, and that's about it. Have a great day. Lots of love. Bye.